Focus. Gary, sit down. Yeah, okay. We're going to the personal use transport vehicles for hire. I got told off for calling it the Lime Scooters report. So, who's leading that? Robin or Kelvin? Robin.
Oh.
While you're on a roll.
Okay. So, as Councillor Dave has noted, Lime scooters are an example of a personal use transport vehicle for hire. But the point of this paper is that it's not just about one operator that we're wanting your advice and direction on. There are a large number of operators of these various types of vehicles, services, that we want to develop a code of practice that's applicable for all of them. So, under the Public Places Bylaw and Policy, there is a requirement for a permit to trade for these operators. And what we are seeking from this committee is some guidance around this. So there are three options available. One is that we just say, thank you very much, but no, we don't want these types of vehicles operating in the city. The second option is that we grant them a permit to trade under the Public Places Bylaw and just allow them to get on with it. There are no specific provisions around this sort of activity in our bylaw or policy currently. Or the third option, as outlined on page 85, is to say yes, but to do some more work through the Access Hamilton Task Force in regard to what would be an appropriate value to put upon that permit, what sort of fees and charges do we want in place, and also to look at a code of practice that covers the key issues and risks that are potentially around this sort of operation. There is a national working group just getting pulled together by the New Zealand Transport Agency, which is looking to get all of the various councils who have either been operating in this space or are about to go into this space together to share the learnings and to look at what additional changes to legislation may be needed moving forward to make these either work more efficiently. So there's issues such as whether they're allowed to ride in cycle lanes at the moment, or to look at addressing some of the safety concerns which I think the media have given plenty of publicity around. So that work's coming through, and this gives us the opportunity to get some direction from councillors as to where they would like to go through with that, and to then through the Access Hamilton look at exploring exactly what those conditions may be, whether we've got trials and set times and all sorts of other things that we'd like to work through. So on that basis I'll hand it across for questions. Okay, we've got a big list here. Ryan's first.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Robin and Calvin. Just some questions, and I'm not trying to have a go, I'm just trying to scope out some of the, I guess, the feedback that I've come across as well. So in the proposed Code of Conduct, or Code of Practice, page 91, 4.5 says operators must recommend that registered users of cycles, and I guess that's to apply to e-scooters or...
So just to be clear, this is an example code of practice. It's we found it as a starting point for us. We're not saying that this is what we have to adopt.
Sure. And that cycles, that could be interchanged, I guess, with... Yes,
the aim is to make this as broad as possible so that we can apply this code to whatever type of vehicles are coming out, because there's, it's very much a changing area.
Yeah, absolutely. Just with how it talks about aged under 18 years of age should be accompanied by an adult. I mean, that to me would be problematic in that you can drive a car at 16 potentially if you've got licences, and or how would police that or manage that. So, you know, potentially just some need to flesh that out. You may be aware, are you aware, I'll ask a question, were you aware on the 15th of January, the Herald article that talked about Auckland City Council potentially levying these fees, or the operators, and using those funds for dedicated cycle/scooter cycleways?
Yes, and that's, I guess, why we're looking to work with that bigger group to understand the other opportunities that may exist if we decide to grant permits to these people to operate.
Great. No, I just flagged that because I know, you know, your fees and charges as considering part of the annual plan process. It's going to be a key thing, I think. Were you aware, are you aware that there's been 655 e-scooter HCC claims since October?
Yes.
Great. And were you aware that ACC has paid out over $200,000 in claims already?
Yes.
It's 100% they got in that multi-choice question.
That's good. That's good. I've got to ask questions.
You gave them the answer.
True or false?
Point of order, Gary called me a dork. Are you aware that the operators are not currently paying ACC levies?
Yes, and I think that they're the sorts of issues that the NZTA are interested in and understanding moving forward what changes to legislation, etc., are needed to ensure that these are operated safely.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No further questions at this time.
Gary.
Come back at me now, Ryan. I think this report fails in one key bit, and I can't find a definition about what we're trying to deal with. So, I mean, I assume, because these things are all new and this is going to be a very changing world, so we're talking about powered vehicles?
No.
So we're not, okay, that's,
So
see what I mean?
Bikes. Yeah, so
okay.
Yes.
We're talking about, is it something that's the driver is supposed to have a licence for?
No.
Okay, so doesn't talk about number of passengers?
No.
Okay, so what are we talking about then? So you haven't defined what we're trying to regulate.
Well, I'm not regulating. We're trying to get some views from around the table as to whether or not we should be looking to support the concept of dockless cycle or scooter operations.
Okay, so is that where's I couldn't find that definition because I'm trying to be helpful. I mean, we're trying
purpose,
to put
paragraph 1 literally is the purpose, Gary.
So it talks about a personal use transport vehicle.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, that equals a car, that equals a bus, that equals a motorbike, it equals a push bike, it equals a scooter, a skateboard.
These are
and those are clearly not the same things.
These are vehicles where people are hiring them for use out of our public space area, so they're our footpaths and those sorts of areas.
Okay, I'm just concerned because I don't think it's going to be useful until we've got an accurate definition about what we are talking about.
And that's certainly something that we can take on board and work out through that code of practice if council decides that that's how they want to proceed.
Because this is going to be filled with there's innovation after innovation after innovation, and we are going to get swamped by, oh, hang on, that doesn't fit within this regulation, it fits within that. So maybe you're trying not to be specific this time, I'm not sure, but you certainly aren't. If that was your goal, you've achieved it.
Yes, that was the goal, was to try and not limit the variety that we may have come through in the future.
Okay, with all due respect, then that does include cars, and it does include motorbikes.
They do not have to have a permit to trade under the public places bylaw.
So is the public places bylaw involved in here somewhere, is it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I haven't seen
Page
26, paragraph 22 on page 85.
85.
Allows, hang on, but you're talking about the business of these things here, aren't you?
Correct.
You're not talking about the use of them.
We cannot manage the use of them except through a permit to trade. The only control that council has of this operation is the fact that we grant them a permit to trade through the public places bylaw and policy.
Okay, sorry, so I've got this completely wrong. And so I thought this was about the use of these things. So at the moment, so this doesn't try to regulate or permit or restrict the use of anything. It's about...
Through the code, we are trying to influence the way the operator in turn influences the people who hire their vehicles. So use of helmets, speed restrictions, all of those sorts of things are impositions that we can put in place through the code of practice.
Okay, so this is not supposed to regulate the use of the vehicles, these things.
No.
So isn't that the first place, isn't that where we should be starting?
We do not have any powers through any bylaws, etc., to regulate the use of them. It is
Surely
only...
we have the power to say who can use our roads and who can use our footpaths and who can...
No, the nature, if you take an e-scooter, for example, and it's one of those, it can operate equally on a footpath or on a road because of the definition of where it sits. That's nothing to do with a council definition.
Sorry, how come then we had to get approval for the Paxters?
So the road user rule requires for use of footpaths for delivery of letters, etc., post, for the road controlling authority to grant permission for that activity.
So the fact that it was a four-wheel driving vehicle, powered, travelling possibly 25 kilometres an hour on our footpaths had nothing to do with it. It was the fact that it was a delivery vehicle.
Yes. And I think that illustrates perfectly the difficulty we have currently where national legislation has not kept up with the variety of vehicles and various modes of transport that are coming into the country and how they may operate.
By way of definition...
Okay, sorry, Claire. So this is not about safety for these things. This is not about safety of the user or safety of a pedestrian or safety of another person who's on the same carriageway, whether it's a footpath or a cycle lane or it's a road. This is not about that at all.
No, there will always be a safety overlay in there. There has to be. But this is...
But that's not in here, though.
No, but that's not... We're not at that. What this is about is this a concept that the council around the table thinks we should be permitting, as in allowing them to trade from council property? That's the first start point for this.
Okay. Well, to me, it seems to be we're a bit arsed about kite. We're
unparliamentary language.
Bottom about kite or something. Okay, I just don't see this as the right way. Yeah, this is a personal view. I can't see this as the right way to go about
Yeah, Gary, you're getting into the
something.
speeches part, which is going to happen.
Well, I guess I'm asking, because I'm concerned. I'm concerned, like everyone around this table,
Yes.
that we've got a new, novel way of travelling, and there's going to be 3-year-olds on the, running on the same spot as someone in these things is going to be. Yes. I thought this was trying to address that.
No. So
or people on walkers,
We have no control over what people privately choose to do. So you and I can go and buy an e-scooter and operate that as long as we comply with the national laws. This is relating to operators coming in and trading and for hire those sorts of vehicles. And the only opportunity we have for having a point of discussion with them and having influence over how they operate is through a permit to trade.
Okay. I
Thanks.
shall withdraw. Thank you.
Angela.
Thank you. Thanks for the report, and I certainly support a permit to trade. The anomaly, though, for me is we do have a public places bylaw that bans skateboarding. So how are we going to manage the conflict with that? Because these are imminently more dangerous than a human-powered skateboard. What's your thoughts?
I don't see a conflict at the moment because these e-scooters are not banned under any of our bylaws. from operating, but it's not about the operating, it's about the trading, going back to the same point we've just had with Councillor Gary. So it would be, if there was someone wanting to trade and they were offering trade and hiring out skateboards, I take your point, but in the absence of that...
But in this example from Auckland Council's Code of Practice, they talk about those kinds of things around, it's safety of use as well as where they can trade from, where they can drop off, all of that stuff. So I'm just trying to understand, in support of Councillor Mallett's line of questioning, what's actually in scope and what's out of scope here, because I guarantee other elected members are going to want to know, do they ride on the footpath, all of these issues are going to come up.
Yes.
Okay.
Where do you want us to bring those up? Because this...
At the Access Hamilton Task Force, if council decides that they want to pursue a permit to trade and they're going to want to develop a code of practice. So if councillors adopt option 3, then we see that we need to have some good workshops via the Access Hamilton Task Force to go through a finer detail and develop a code of practice for Hamilton City that meets the requirements that we have.
So just a bit of guidance then, Mr Chair. I have questions around enforcement of helmets and things like that, so that's not really for this meeting.
No. What I would suggest is that the Access Hamilton actually arrange with management to have an item actually on the full council workshop list about this once it's prepared, something for it to discuss.
Yeah. So
that all councillors get that, maybe a bigger opportunity to have a bite at that.
Okay, so...
soon. So that it go to, if it gets passed, go to Access Hamilton, they work up a draft which gets put in front of a workshop of the whole council.
Okay, so the only questions that are in scope in this report are whether we should or shouldn't have a code of practice.
No, I think the first one before that is whether or not council support the concept of actually moving to having a trading in our public places for these type of events.
So a question around, okay, so what is the trading environment? Is it the entire city? Or is it designated?
That would be one of the questions we work through the code of practice and that permitting process. They're the sorts of questions that we'd like to work through with councillors. Are there areas where you don't think it is appropriate for people to be operating? For example, Hamilton Gardens or the zoo. So they're the sorts of things that we'd like to workshop with you.
Oh.
Today.
It's one of these things about you have to prove that a bylaw is the right thing, right type of thing to have before you even start thinking about what's in it.
Isn't it? This is a short item, but I'm going to hold my questions, but I guarantee they come up from other members anyway, and then I'll be annoyed that I didn't ask my questions.
Yeah, I think it is confusing that both questions are...
I always like to follow the rules.
But do we want to at least start the work on this or not, really? Think about it like that.
I guess I'm mindful of the time, Councillor
We could have a fantastic workshop here today, but did you bring your sleeping bags?
And what we were really wanting to do was just get an indication where the councillors wanted to have these sorts of vehicles for hire on our streets, and then how they would like us to proceed, whether it's just straight a permit or whether you want a permit with a code of practice.
And there's been a number of people asking for that to be addressed. Why haven't we got lime scooters here, sort of question, or if we do, why don't they have to wear helmets? That can happen further down the track, that sort of issue.
Yeah, I'm happy to move the staff recommendation.
Okay, and Mark said that to get it on the table, we've got question list. Mark, you're next.
Yeah, cool. Just beat me with a jump there.
Just bear in mind the following question is what we're trying to do today and what's going to be done in the future.
Is there anywhere in your thinking at this stage about e-skateboards, because they are coming? And that will go grey with that area you're talking about.
Isn't the point of this to address things like e-skateboards or anything else new that comes along, hoverboards, whatever?
Yeah, flying cars, isn't it? But you're talking about, powered ice skates. Right.
we would
That's
try
for
and
Dunedin.
ensure that the code of practice was wide enough to cover those sorts of
Okay,
things.
cool,
yes.
thanks. So this doesn't include bike shops like Electrify, for example?
No,
No.
Renting out stuff, okay. So this is expressly for people, it's basically an Uber type sort of a thing on the street?
the e-scooter.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, concept. Is there anywhere, and I'm conscious of what the trap that Melbourne fell into with the Onzo bikes, and they didn't employ anybody in town, and so it became the council's problem to go and clean these things up from trees and rivers, etc. Is there anywhere there that we could put in that these people do have their own employees and that they are responsible for their vehicles?
As part of the some of the other ones around the country, what they've done as part of the agreements they've actually reached with the individual operators, some of them have stipulated they have to have people local resident.
Yep.
And then there's KPIs which are put in place in terms of some of the appendices to the permit around timeframes for removing bikes or scooters that are left in inappropriate places or present a risk or whatever else.
Right, cool. So I'm assuming that you're thinking that where they operate them, where they park them, all that sort of stuff is for further discussion down the track.
Correct.
Yeah, great. Okay, that's all for me. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks. Paula, please.
I'm not sure that my questions are going to go anywhere here either. I would like to know, however, in the process, because the staff recommendation is approves the development of a code of practice, would that be a draft code of practice? Because there is so much we haven't had time and won't have time, Mr. Chair, to discuss today before we get this underway. So I don't feel comfortable with that. I would have really liked to have had all that background information perused first. So, go back to my question. The recommendation that's been moved says approves the development of a code of practice. Is there to be public feedback? Therefore, is it really a draft code of practice and a draft framework for fees so that we aren't telling the public that we're going to create something that doesn't go through their approval first, because it is a strong
Paula, by
public issue.
necessity, it is a draft that's given because it has to come back to council for approval, so it can only be a draft.
Well, I still think that
It doesn't use the word yes.
It should probably use the word draft, because that's what it communicates to people, that we're going to make a decision about what it will cost and how these things can be operated. We're not at that point yet, are we?
No.
No, we're not, most definitely not at that point.
I'm pleased to hear it, thank you.
This is an in-principle thing, as Kelvin and Robin have explained. Do you want us to go and do the work in this area that would enable this at the end of the day to...
So I'd like to ask the mover and second to consider to insert the word draft.
I don't think
That's in
that
their
makes
hands.
much difference to it, but I think that's no
it.
problems. Yep.
The other
Draft
thing is-
code of practice.
Thank
Yep.
you. The other thing is, at some stage when this comes back to us, we'll also be considering the relativity of impact of hired out transport, which is what we're talking about, with a fee on public places, and the emergence of new electrified types of transport, as you've said, that may be privately owned. Or did you say something about
Remember, this is
roller
in
skates?
relation to hireable vehicles.
Yes, I know, but in
Not
order to
private
understand...
ones. The mayor's scooter has got nothing to do with this.
Except that there is an impact, and you've got to understand the relativity between the impact of things that people may hire in public spaces, or they may just privately bring into public spaces, still has an impact on the general public.
Yeah, and I'm
they
quite
can
sure that
own scooters, they
Access
can own
Hamilton can
electric
look at that
scooters.
because it's got to look at things like cycle lanes versus footpaths and things like that, and road use, all that sort of issue. It's a good point, but not for today.
No, but I'm
And
asking that it be...
The mayor, the
be
deputy
factored in.
mayor wishes to ask questions on when he's going to be able to use a Lime scooter to come from home each day instead of his
I
car.
will be making sure that the mayor has declared his personal scooter on his register of conflicts or register of interest. But seriously, what I hear and understand is going to the Access Task Force. You'll be able to look at a range of, a toolkit, and presumably there'll be some reference to other towns in New Zealand and Australia where they've moved quite along the path, and some of the pitfalls, some of the things they've learning from their experiences, I guess.
Yes, very much.
Absolutely.
The other issue is that, you know, some people do own scooters, and so you've got the hire scooters.
Yeah, we're not talking about the other private ones.
I'm just looking at in terms of you know, some of the rules. You know, we've got the issue.
Yeah, but this is not the place for that. We're not doing that.
Not today.
No.
But in
So
the
there's no point talking about it today.
Yeah, but in terms of the brief of the Access Task Force, right? Are we?
The staff will bring information to the Access Hamilton Task Force relating to all issues arising from this today. They're asking us, do you want to start the work that will enable the hiring out of these types of vehicles in the city using public space? And there'll be things arising from that that'll be sent off. Some things we'll have to ask the police enforcement if someone wants to talk about that, whatever. New bylaws perhaps. But that's not what they're asking today. Because otherwise you might as well be in a bloody workshop and we'll thrash everything out here. Oh, sorry, unparliamentary language.
Okay, so I can raise a whole lot of issues at the task force because Councillor Bunting is going to be a far more generous chair. That's cool. I'll support that.
Not if I can get to him beforehand. Okay. Rob, thank you.
Yeah, looking, Chair, to save some time and cost in developing this code of practice, do you think a pragmatic alternative might be to contact some of these several bike and scooter operators and ask them to present to you their plan, which might include that code of practice, and we can cherry pick. Obviously, it'll be their code of practice rather than ours, but we may be able to churn that into something which could be a good outcome for the Hamilton. And I say that on the basis that already in this short discussion today, there's been some holes picked in the Auckland one, which presumably cost Auckland thousands and thousands of dollars and heaps of time to develop.
So our intention is to cherry pick, but it's from the other councils who have got the code of practice, because the operators aren't developing their own code of practice. They are just complying with the requirements that each of the councils are putting upon them.
But it seems to me the councils kind of haven't quite got it either.
This is just one example.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but the other ones must have copied off Auckland's or.
No.
I think they're all they're new iterations as everything is uncovered and they've worked their way through it. Now, having sat in some of the meetings with some of the proposed operators here, they're not advocating anything other than trying to get the best deal that they can to trade. So I'm not sure that I would be suggesting or supporting the idea that we go to them and ask them to put forward their best idea of what might be the most workable code of practice to best support them.
But we let and I don't know how much I can say in open, but we did let the car share people come to us with their plan pretty much all wrapped up and complete. And I know it's slightly different in terms of a car being different to these situations, but we did allow that to happen without us introducing or considering introducing a bylaw about having rental cars available at spaces around the city.
So we're not proposing to introduce a bylaw. The car share operations are able to operate under the traffic bylaw.
Okay.
These are able to operate under the public places bylaw.
So you won't be changing the bylaw at all?
No.
Okay, sorry, I've misread that then.
It's just a code of practice.
Okay.
And I think there are opportunities for trials. So if we sign up, if we decide to go down this track and sign up and develop a code of practice, then there is certainly the ability to have a trial period and to
revise it. And okay, right. Look, I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable with that.
And I think that's where that national working group are also going to be really useful to pull that all together, but to also understand where, in a lot of cases, those codes of practice and at a local level, we're not going to be able to address all the issues, and that there will need to be some changes to national legislation.
Yep, okay, thank you, that's good. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded with the addition of the word draft in there. Angela and myself moved and seconded it. we'll take a vote by hands. Those in favour? So, all right, okay, we want vote on the there, on the board.
No, we're going to have a debate.
Oh, do you want debate?
Yes, I do.
Christ's sake. All right.
They're all lining up behind me now.
This is, honestly, councillors, I think seriously, this is getting ridiculous at the amount of time you're spending on really minor things. I can't stop you doing that, but you will be here until well after dinner time at the rate we're going. Fine. And this is a process point to get something started. So just decide whether you want to be part of it or not. James, you're the first speaker.
Yeah. Hey, yeah, look, all for this option, but I do think we do have to be, we do have to have a code of practice here. And I noticed the Auckland one doesn't refer anything to in regards to alcohol for users. I think there should be some sort of guidance there, because if you're going to have people jump on those things, there should be some sort of restrictions there. If you can put restrictions on for helmets and age and speed limits and everything else, you should be able to put something on for alcohol. We've got a Vision Zero here, but these machines may add to our woes a little bit, and they have to be up to speed with these things as well, because there have been reports from Lime that their scooters have a problem with their wheels locking at speed, and these things go up to 27 kilometres an hour, and that's caused a few issues where a woman broke her neck, her C7 vertebrae, and a media guy fell off and fractured his knee in 8 places. So they are quite dangerous, but I think we do have to have some sort of rules. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Gary, please.
Thank you. I think it's bizarre that we're trying to get rules around how you buy or sell or hire a thing before we've even defined what the thing is. And we haven't defined what the thing is and where it can operate. So I think this is a complete and utter waste of staff's time, and I respect staff's time. They have many things they should be doing. I think this would be one of the worst uses of their time we could ever send them off on doing. So I will not be supporting it.
Thank you. Leo?
Yeah, look, Robin's dead right, because there's really no definition of these things. As far as I can work out, it falls under the definition of a vehicle, which is a contrivance equipped with wheels, tracks, revolving runners, which moves or is moved. This morning we spent quite a bit of time talking about pedestrian crashes here. Here in this city we're 9% higher than the national average. The 4 main contributing factors, of course, here are poor observation, which is running at 40%. Out there we've got all our pedestrians wandering around with their head looking at the phone, and they don't see what the hell's coming. And here we're going to put a Lime scooter or something like that down there. I don't think it's our problem. I really think that central government have to come out with some definitions for these things, and this is where we're lacking. So what I would be doing is I would be supporting option 1 at this point in time.
Yep. Okay. And Mark, please.
Thank you. Look, just very briefly, all these are great points that everyone's raising, but this isn't really the forum to have it. We're trying to debate whether or not we have a code of practice for this kind of operation, and I think we definitely need to explore it, because it has an impact on the people walking and driving around the streets in Hamilton. It's a place, it's a business that doesn't have a set venue as such, and it's new to town, so it's also having big social implications around other cities already. And it's definitely the way people are wanting to travel with ride sharing, and as opposed to owning their own vehicles. So, yep, it is new to town. I think we need to have a good look at it, and look forward to welcoming you all to it. But they're all valid points you raise, and let's have a good thrash out of this. And what I would warn against is getting paralysis by analysis. We don't go too over the top with this kind of thing as well. We've always got to keep in our mind, do we actually need a set of rules? But we'll have that. We'll kick that around at another meeting.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, I disagree that this is bizarre from Councillor Gary, but that's not bizarre of people to disagree with him. I think you guys are on the right track. I think you're trying to navigate something that hasn't really landed yet, and it's a very new space. And I think you're on the right track. And I think as a council, as staff, as elected members, your collaboration with other councils, the operators, etc., will put us in good stead, and we'll be able to launch something with some practices in place, and with trials, and test this out. So, yeah, I endorse what you're doing and look forward to the next phase.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Andrew.
This discussion reminds me of the stories we've all heard at school 100 years ago, when some cities were so scared of the new motor car that a man had to run in front of it with a red flag. This is really exciting. We're moving into a new era of transport for locally for around town when we get off the public transport, and I'm just really looking forward to this getting to Mark's committee for further discussion.
Thank you. There are no further speakers. I'll put this to the vote on the board. The vote is for, the only resolution in front of us is the staff recommendation with the addition of the word draft in 2A. It's carried. So we'll move on to the next item, thanks, which is the sale and disposal of council land. Nick's here, thanks.
Periodically, we're obliged to review our council policies on a recurring cycle. We've reviewed this particular policy. It has been operating well. It gives the staff appropriate guidance in respect to sale of council-owned land, and therefore our recommendation is that the policy as it stands be approved. Happy to take any questions.
Oh, sorry. Martin.
Yeah, so the current policy is all sale of land has to come back. Initial decision to sell a piece of land comes back to council.
Correct.
And then obviously you have a parameters around price in terms of this policy.
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor Andrew. Moved, seconded by Gary. Rob, question?
Yeah, do you think it's wise to have in a public policy that we would, and this is under Part 6, that land to be sold must be sold for a sum of not less than 90% of the current market valuation? Yeah. And I say that because, you know, nobody ever goes to market with their own home and says, you know, it's up for sale and this is the lowest price I'll accept. Yeah. And, you know, I just... Yeah, well, okay, I'll wait for the answer.
So the reason for that is that what we found previously was that the policy required property to be sold at valuation without any discretion. And effectively, if I seek two valuations on the same piece of property, I instruct the valuer in exactly the same way, I will get two different prices for that property. So what this meant was that if we didn't have any sort of leeway, effectively every decision to sell a property effectively became a two-step process. You'd make a decision to sell, we'd go and market it, we couldn't potentially achieve the market price that was established by the first valuation. Effectively, we'd have to come back seeking a second resolution to sell. Yeah. So it was just to provide that kind of flexibility, and that's consistent with what other councils do in terms of delegations around property.
So there are other councils who have something similar to this.
Yes, that's
right. In their publicly reported land. Yes, sale policy.
That's right. And effectively what it does is it just allows for a streamlined process. I mean, ultimately you're always attempting to obtain the best possible price for any land that is sold, but you don't necessarily want to be coming back for a second decision around it.
In your professional opinion, do you think that dumbs down the price of land that we sell?
No, I don't. Effectively, I mean, if we're selling land in a public process, we'll have an auction. Or a public tender process, a competitive process. Mm-hmm. We'll obviously seek valuation advice prior to that process so that we've got an estimate of where we think the price will fall, but ultimately the price may not actually achieve that valuation on the day. Conversely, it might exceed it by some considerable amount.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, and I think you covered it then, Nick. Your rebuttal to what Rob was saying is that we're in a competitive market. The only reason a property would sell below market valuation is if there was no competitive market, i.e. the real value of the market is the real value of the property is lower than what is suggested.
Yes,
so and you might run it, and that might be a situation where the council says no, we might pull the thing out of the auction, but yes. The market is where the market is.
Yes, that's right. I mean, typically, you'd be aiming to sell in a transparent, competitive kind of way. There are occasions where there might only be one purchaser for a piece of property, in which case obviously a negotiation ensues.
But the reasons that there would be only one purchaser is because there's one there's some reason that the land only attracts one purchaser. No doubt.
That's correct. Yeah. So it doesn't have widespread.
It might be adjoining to the property, or it might be
Yeah, that's right. And the classic example actually of those sorts of situations is either a bit of stopped road, unformed paper road, two farmers, either side of it. One is interested, the other potentially isn't. Alternatively, something like a public walkway that's no longer required. There are only two potential purchasers for it. If one expresses no interest at all, then you're down to just the one party.
Thank you.
Sorry, councillors. Yep, I got that. You've seconded it, Gary. Andrew's moved it. Yep. So it's as per the staff recommendation. Are there any speakers? If not, I'll take vote of show of hands. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. Councillors, page 102, the DC's contributions, remissions for the Q2 of the, which is up until December the 31st, I guess. Stafford, there, yep. And this is for information. Stafford, anything you'd like to highlight for us? Yep.
Just like to note that the remission that you looked at last quarter has come up now in the reporting. So that's the large $4 million that was approved by this committee 1 quarter ago. Any questions?
Okay, we've got Gary first, then Rob.
On your graph, your remissions by activity, which one of those, so some of that, sorry, so the remission, the big one we talked about, you're talking about, is split, some of it was for transport, some of it was for stormwater, wastewater, da-da-da, is that right? So that's included in the graph?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. And when you brought that up to us, it broke it down by those activities, didn't it?
Yeah, if you'd like to refer to the table on page 105, the top line there has the water at 735, wastewater at 705.
Slow down. Oh, yeah, gotcha. Yep.
So you have it line by line on that table.
You.
Okay, you've finished, Gary?
Yep, yeah, sorry,
thanks,
thank you.
Rob, thanks.
Just a couple of questions on the Ryman remission on page 105. Just in regard to, do you feel like our formula, I know this is all formula driven, but the 705,000 remission for wastewater, when you have a care living, which is a hospital sort of establishment there, is the connect right? You know, I would think over a period of time, a hospital would use quite a significant amount of water, probably, and wastewater, perhaps much more than the number of homes that might be on that same, and that's the way I link it to, the number of homes that might be on that same site. Are you comfortable that the formula's correct for this type of facility?
Yes, I think it's correct. They've used actual metrics from their other similar facilities, and it's in line with what other companies that run similar facilities provide us metrics with. We've also got water meter data from other retirement villages. So across the board, the data that they've provided is within the bounds of what we think will be the
Okay, so the evidence that provided supports the high level of remission.
That's correct.
That's there, okay. And I guess the transport one is the same, although living quite close to that facility now, I can assure you that the number of major trucks going in and out of there, several hundred times a day, I think, is quite significant. And then every one of those 436 units, what they call them, retirement villas, are going to have a garage too. You know, there's, but anyway, I guess if the formula's the formula's right, the formula's right.
Thanks. Okay. Are there any other questions? If not, I'll put the recommendation that we receive the report, seconded by James. Thanks. No debate on that. If not, show of hands. Thanks. Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Stafford. Page 107 is the schedule of reports. That's for your information, noting that there's also a column about when the bylaws and policies are due for renewal, which year that falls in, just for extra information. Thanks to the governance for that. And note staff recommendation point B, that this is a living document, so it's not necessarily stuck in concrete. Staff will apply to us to change dates where necessary, like we've already had a couple at this meeting. So, but this is the best case at the moment. Anything else we need to say? You're right there. Yep. It's been moved by Mark, seconded by Andrew. Any questions? If not, I'll put the resolution. Those in favour, against, carried. Thanks. Now, I move that we exclude the public for all the reasons written down there, seconded by James. Those in favour, against, that's carried. Thanks very much. So we're into public excluded, and we'll just wait a minute or two for the public.